Hello and welcome to Feros Care. I'm Mick O'Regan. I had the pleasure of interviewing one of Feros Care's heroes, Professor Greg Tegart. Greg is among Australia's most eminent scientists and science administrators. In his mid-80s, his extraordinarily active mind, fueled by a lifelong curiosity to understand just how things work, is still focused on bringing the benefits of technology to people everywhere. He's been feted by kings and presidents, jointly awarded a Nobel Peace Prize, and internationally acknowledged for his pioneering technological work. For all of that, Greg Tegart holds by some simple truths: love of family, care for others, and an unending desire to bring the benefits of technology to enrich the lives of ordinary people. And for all that, we regard him as a Feros hero.
I can't get seabooks. I'm going around that corner.
Hello, Robot. How are you? I've come to see Feros Care, see what they're up to. I don't feel old because I haven't actually thought about it, I guess, about being old. I've always imagined that somehow I was still young at heart and I had sufficient cognitive functions left to keep me going. One of these days it'll catch up with me, I suppose. The other thing that I've always had is a sense of curiosity. I've always liked to interact with people, and I like to travel, and I've had the opportunity to travel many parts of the world, interact with people at all levels, from peasants to presidents and kings and things, in fact, all sorts of things. When I was a young man, there was no such thing as television or anything else much, no computers, no nothing. So all the things that we did were things that we had to do ourselves. So I was very interested in things like making things. I used to make model aeroplanes. I was interested in photography. I used to make crystal sets and listen to the test matches under the blankets, with the earphones and this sort of thing. All these things, I was always interested and curious about what was going on. At the same time, I was quite good at school, I agree, but I wasn't completely a swot. I was interested in sport and doing other things. So we used to make billy carts and race them down the hill outside our house. In fact, the bottom of the street ended at the cemetery wall, and if you kept going too hard, you might end up there yourself, People become much more self-contained and egocentric, particularly when you see people, you go into a railway carriage or something, or a tram, everybody's looking at their smartphones, or you go into a restaurant and you see four people sitting around the table not talking to one another and looking at their smartphones. Somehow, in this era of intense communication, maybe we've lost personal communication, And that was what I had a lot of, I guess, when I was young. I mean, there was no other way. You had to talk to people, you had to interact with people. And that's, I guess, the way it's always been in my life. I was born in Melbourne, in a suburb called East St Kilda, sort of middle-class suburb, I guess, on the Australian dream of quarter acre block. My mother and father lived there. I remember very well, interestingly when I was a boy, that in those days when the trams were running, there were cable trams in the city. Quite fascinating to go and see them in the museum now and think, gosh, am I really a museum piece in that way? I hope I'm not. And I think that what I've been doing and the way I've been working over the years has kept me from going into a museum, kept me in the forefront of things. Growing old hasn't really sort of meant much to me in a way. My life has gone on. I've had an interesting life because I've been married twice. When I first went to England and I did a PhD, I was 26, I think, and I got married in England and to an English girl, and I had two small children. I was working hard for my PhD and as a lecturer. I spent quite a bit of time with them in the recreation, etc. But then they started to grow up, and then my wife died, and I came back to Australia and married again. My second wife is about 18 years younger than me, and I think that maybe perhaps gave me another burst of life, because then we had two children. So I went through the process of these children growing up again. Now, again at that stage I was working pretty hard. I was with BHP running their research labs in Melbourne and travelling a lot. And while I had interaction with my children, again I wasn't completely understanding all the things the way they developed. But as time has gone on, my grandchildren have now come through again in two stages. And this last burst of grandchildren have come to me at an age when I really have more time, I think, to reflect. And so I watch with great interest the way in which they're developing and think, well, yes, that's how kids develop, but I didn't sort of reflect on it at the time. But this sort of progression through my life, I suppose, has kept me in contact with the young people all the way, I guess. That's the way I'm thinking. And so I haven't really felt growing old and looking back and saying, oh, well, there were my children and they were the only ones. Somehow this continuity, and maybe the second marriage, again brought me in contact with young people again, you know. And I'm always thinking about where things are going and what things might happen and that type of thing. I suppose that's always intrigued me, and that's what I think keeps me young. I don't feel old. I feel mentally, I just feel a young man. I go and look at these pictures of me as a young man and think, yeah, well, that was interesting. That's what I was doing then. And why can't I do it now? I've become more and more a social scientist, I think, as I get older. And in this assistive technology thing, I've been looking at ethics and privacy and that sort of thing, of how technology impacts on people.
Do you currently have any other type of illness?
But as part of all that, I guess I was always interested in exploring the opportunities for new areas to look at and to see what was happening. And that's in the end which brought me to this current interest in this assistive technologies for the aged and disabled. Oh, hi Julie, I'm very interested in what you're up to here. So could you just show me an example of what you're doing?
Greg, I'm actually going to call a client now and have a chat to her about her health.
Over these years I built up some interests in things like biotechnology and nanotechnology and information technology and cognitive sciences. I don't think I've ever seen them much as challenges. I've always seen them as opportunities, I think, and a chance to do something different. And I've had to make choices, significant choices at various times, you know, like, well, would I go to England to do a PhD, or would I stay in Australia? When I was in England, would I come back to Australia? Would I stay there, like many of my friends did? Or, you know, at various times you had an offer, you know, of an opportunity. You know, I'm working happily away in one field, and then suddenly an opportunity arises, and I have to make a choice. Do I stay where I am, or do I change? I guess, perhaps unlike many of my contemporaries, I haven't stayed in the one field all the time. And I didn't ever see myself as a complete academic. I changed after I'd been in England and ended up as a professor of materials. When I came back to Australia, I didn't come back to academia. I came back to work for BHP and to run their new research laboratories that they were building in Melbourne. And that took me into more and more broader things. I've just had the opportunity to move around a whole lot of things. So at my ripe old age, I know a little about many things, which is very dangerous, of course. Somehow, it's this innate curiosity in me that I'm always looking for patterns and looking for way things develop. I drive my wife mad because we go shopping. So we go into shops and she's going and looking at all the clothes and things. what she's looking at clothes. I'm going around looking at all the labels. I'm interested to know where they're all made. I'm watching trade patterns. I'm looking at how the trade pattern's forming, you know, becoming too expensive to manufacture in Shenzhen anymore. So they move to Cambodia, or they move to Peru, or the Philippines, or something like this. Where are things happening? Because I'm fascinated by trade patterns and economics as well, I think. Somehow along the line I've picked up all this. I haven't got old because I haven't ever stopped thinking about all these things. It's always been something happening. I suppose it's just an innate curiosity that's driven me all my life. I mean, just wanting to know more about things and how people react in situations and how technology impacts on people, that sort of thing. Oops, you drove me up in the wall, robot.